Mr. Peter Ward, based right now in UK, from the company of WeTrack. Basically, WeTrack is an event delivery software that provides tools to deliver events. And WeTrack actually provides project, risk, readiness, run sheet, and incident management to venues, events, and governing bodies internationally, including clients like the Wimbledon, Ascot, International Cricket Council, the Dubai Expo 2020, the Commonwealth England, Rugby League World Cup, GAISF, which actually they just ran the recent World Urban Games before the World Beach Games last year, the Volleyball International Federations, UK festivals, World Triathlon, Cheltenham Racecourse, the Ryder Cup. I think, Peter, if you can get maybe tickets for me to the Ryder Cup, it would be great. Okay. European PGA, Special Olympics, the Saudi Games, and many, many others. So the software was created by Peter and his partner Clive Stephens following their experience at London 2012, and is totally focused on improving event operations at major sporting events. Today, WeTrack has continued to grow quickly based on referrals and networking, as they do not have any sales team. So their focus is always and will always remain on events, venues, and adjacent sectors. This allows them to be true specialists and not have to compromise their approach to be all things to all people.
Thank you for that. And thank you, everybody. So the idea of this is definitely not to just try and give you a sale pitch type thing, because that's not what anyone wants. So I can rattle through this very quickly. Yes, event delivery software. So we don't do anything which is public facing. So we don't do any ticketing, registration type apps, mobile apps for events. There are lots of companies do that sort of thing. Our focus is entirely on the nitty gritty operations, which are quite often overlooked, but I think is what a lot of you will probably have experience of. The unloved ops. So the background, yeah, very briefly, was I was working on London 2012 in the PMO team, and Clive was the park general manager. I was getting frustrated with him and some of his team because they weren't updating the spreadsheets that we had to give them. He was getting frustrated because he didn't understand what we were sending him. So the idea was very simple of, okay, how do we make a platform which does all the project management stuff we need it to do, but is specialized for major events or large events, and is really easy to use. That was easy to say as a naive 26-year-old. It was less easy to actually create a full-blown system and take on the big companies that do this. But our first client was the Ryder Cup. Neo, interestingly, we've already just started work on Ryder Cup 2026, so they plan a long way out. But yeah, offices in London, Bulgaria, and then, as I was saying a little bit earlier, a part-time chair in Lausanne. But we're entirely dedicated to tech. So yeah, we don't have a marketing or a sales team. In terms of applications and customers, it came from this major event world in the middle, but increasingly we do some smaller events because there are only so many of these that happen. And stadiums, so we do quite a lot with venues and other stadia as well. And also increasingly it's being used for internal governance, not necessarily just for delivering the event, but for the structure and governance. So the Federation FIA, for example, uses it entirely for internal governance and project planning rather than delivering any of the events. But in terms of users, predominantly event operators of some kind or event suppliers, venue owners, and then people working at the international federations and governing bodies. So yeah, in terms of clients, that's a sort of sample. So you see it's a mix between major events. I saw someone was at Expo 2020, so Expo from sort of the big side of it. And then, yeah, the other major events that were mentioned. We also just signed Rugby World Cup this week on Tuesday, yesterday. So that's the newest one out of this family. But then others, international federations and governing bodies, and then some of these that you won't know, which are UK events, and still some of them not small. So in terms of what we actually do, we have these series of modules. So it came from this project management world, and in the blue around the right on the outside is what we call our planning modules. So these tend to be day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year type classic project management. You've got start dates, you've got due dates, you give it a status, you assign it to people, you can map dependencies, do all that sort of stuff. Then we wanted to integrate in a risk and issue register. So one of the slightly frustrating things that I found at London 2012 was we had my team and then a separate planning team, and then we had a separate risk and issues team, and the three didn't sort of connect very well. So we had sometimes people testing, say, ticket scanners on the gate, someone saying, yeah, they look great, but actually we didn't know there was a risk that the supplier, you know, couldn't create them on time. So what I wanted to do is integrate them all a little bit closer. Then we built this readiness system fairly recently. So this is designed definitely for major events. No one else would ever use it, but planning all of those desktops, walkthroughs, test events, whatever it is, against all of those capabilities, mapping them to client groups and all that stuff of, are we going to be ready to host this major event on time? Again, it's just moving people away from lots and lots and lots of spreadsheets, and then it captures all of the lessons, all of the actions, and gives summary reports automatically based on what you're searching by. Then in the light blue, as you move into more of an operational role, you can have the best project management system in the world, but people just throw it out the window because everyone here, I think, are event operators. You know what it's like. You're on ground, you're on site, you need to sort things out immediately. You don't have time to update big project management systems. So these tend to focus much more minute by minute and hour to hour, and use GIS and mapping technology. So it's much more about where things physically are on a site, what needs to be done. The run sheets, I think most of you will probably call them run sheets, but others call them production schedules, call sheets. They come by many names. They generally annoy me because people spend a lot of time creating them, and then they get printed out and put into a pocket, which means they're never looked at again, or they're immediately out of date if something is delayed. So the whole idea is to bring all of that onto mobile, into an app, have all the dependencies in there, notify people what you've got coming up, what's overdue, just trying to digitize a lot of that process. And then the incident management event control platform is much more about capturing what issues are occurring on site. So visualizing all of those and making sure you've got the audit trail behind it. We're also just started building the pre-event activation process or affirmation process, depending what you call it, PEEPs. So all of that check-in, yes, this is ready, that's ready, that's ready. You can get lead stewards or anyone, event services, on a mobile. They'll get sent what are the things that they need to check. They say they're checking them. All of that information is fed through automatically into the event control dashboard. So the safety officer or event director, or whatever he or she has as a role, can see what issues are occurring and then when it's safe to open that particular venue. We're also building a sustainability module. We are working with some professors at a university here to see if we can apply a bit of machine learning and AI to this as part of an Innovate UK grant. So we're not lacking ambition. The system I'm going to show you now, this is a fake major event site. So this is for a tender. We don't actually work with the IC at the moment, but we're quite a long way through a process with them, which is why I've got their logo on. So no one phoned me into the IOC branding team just yet. So we work on a traffic light system, and we have grey for things that haven't started in the future, red for things that are behind, amber potentially slipping, green are on track, blue are complete. That's the very basics of the system. We create projects and tasks, and we can assign them to different venues or client groups, whatever it is. And if you think back to that list of clients, they're very different. They're not all using the system in the same way. So over the years, we've built something which is really flexible in terms of how we set things up. So we can customize the language and the structure for an international federation. It's very different to something like Wimbledon, which is very different to a World Cup. So we start with that. We start with building out the platform basics so it matches what the client needs, and that we actually reverse engineer it. So we go, what do you need to report on in future? What do you want to report on? And then we make sure that we're capturing those tags and fields within the system, which means that then we can automate reporting later down the line. So I will come to a bit more of this, but that's as a general overview. Now, as I log in, the key to any platform is to get people to actually use it. And for that reason, when you log in, it just defaults to this, just my items. So this is only showing things that are assigned to me. So I've got things that are overdue and things that are upcoming. Most of these are actually risks or action steps around risks, which is why they might look a bit odd. But I can see I've got a milestone here actually, which is hotel contracts to be signed. It's very overdue, so I can click onto this and I can mark it as red, amber, green, blue. So if you mark something as red or amber, you have to put in a comment, because it's really unhelpful if people say something has failed but not why. If it's green or blue, you don't need to. So I'm just going to say that's done, that's blue, that's now live, and that updates everywhere else that it needs to. If there are dependencies, it will notify them that that's been complete. So that is, and the user only ever updates a task or a subtask level, and everything else is calculated automatically. So I'm just going to go through a few of the other product pages as such. By the way, we're all on the, all of this is within the project system. So because it's modular, we split it out this way. So we'll come to the incidents and the modules later on. I'm now going to, I can switch this just to my FA, or I can see everything. So for now, I'm just going to swap this over to everything in the system. So now I've got a huge list of projects and tasks. They've got different project managers. They've got different FA leads. We've got document attachments. We can get an overview of how the project's going based on the number of tasks that are inside it. And we can open up one. So we've got accommodation, hotel B. We can see there's an attachment, which is a floor plan, which is a fake floor plan from somewhere in the States. And we could go into it, and we can also link that into other sharing platforms, document sharing platforms.
So Peter, just before you go on, just regarding the users, I think it's important to mention that the user that you are using right now is an admin user, right? So that's why you can actually see everybody's. But in reality, if it's in an organizing committee, every functional area, I guess, would have one dedicated user.
Yeah, it varies. You're right, I'm showing you everything. When we do an onboarding session with a new client, we make a much smaller view of it and grow it out from there. But what's nice about one of the problems that you've often got with a project management way of doing things is you only ever have a few people who might know how to use, for example, Microsoft Project. So everything gets fed through that small team. Now, there are potentially some benefits of doing that, but the risks are that they just always get overwhelmed and you create the bottlenecks. So what we try and do is open up so as many people can use the system as possible and just make it really easy to use. And then we can capture any of the things that might look a bit odd happening within the system through some other things I can show you later. So we can limit permissions entirely, but if you can open up an entire platform and have different functional areas all contributing to the same things. So for example, this is venue management is in charge of this, but if I open up this task group, so this sub-project, I can see I've actually got accommodation and accreditation and accommodation and arrivals and departures, both working on the same or different tasks within a project. So we try and encourage clients to do a deliverable mindset rather than just silo FA type projects. Without going to this is all the information we've got. This is a client operational plan. It's got different sections. We can update who needs to do things in there. We can see any risks and issues that are linked to this particular project, the history around that, the documents. Because we've got the audit trail going on everywhere, it avoids that problem of someone updating someone else's task, which is something which we're always asked about. But I don't think we've yet had a single instance of that happening in any negative way. Not that I've heard about anyway. So just going through a few more of the views. These are all the functional areas that we have in the system, and this is their overall status. So this is with all the work that they're doing. But because we've already created a whole load of filters and tags, we said that's fine, but I'm only interested in how everyone is doing at, say, the aquatic centre. So that's a very different look. So the concept is you present all the data, you keep it all in one place, but you can filter and layer and get to the stuff that's relevant to you or your team really, really quickly.
So if we look at milestones, normally who are the ones who actually put in the milestones in your system? Is it one functional area dedicated to, for example, planning, coordination, and integration, or is it separate functional areas that do that?
It varies enormously. We've got some who have a central team and they decide that. So what I'll do actually is open this up. So in terms of loading up a milestone, and this Gantt all happens automatically from all the rest of the data that's in there. But if I say, just show me, say, the gold milestones. So that becomes your gold milestone timeline across the entire event. So it may be that what happens, I can turn those animations off if someone's getting nauseous from that. But quite often what happens is a central team will build out those large central milestones that they need to get done, and then let the functional areas or departments build out from underneath those and add projects around them and add the other tasks that they need to be done to lead into that milestone. So you can slice and dice these views depending on what level of detail you need to get into.
And I also know that your system actually is able to give some triggers for reminders and emails. Maybe I think that would be also interesting to our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's quite a lot around that, and you can choose how often your notifications are sent. So you can batch them to be daily or weekly, or send me immediately about different types of things. What we try and do is make sure the system is great, but it becomes useless if it's just a pretty black box that someone updates once a month. So the whole idea is to make it really easy to put information in and then really easy to get it out. So notifications is a big part of that. But what you don't want to do is just fire out notifications every time something changes, because people get overload and they just ignore all of the notifications, which means they miss the important things. But if I just move back across here, so I've got, say, 3 red tasks in my accreditation project, which I just going to open up. So I just got rid of that. So I've got 11 red tasks across everything, and I can see where they sit. I can go in, update things, see the most recent updates, who updated it, what and when. I can go in and see more details, same with attachments, etc., etc. If I load all the tasks in the system, I can start navigating through this way. Very quickly, risk and issues. So risk and issue management, especially in current climate, is no longer really a nice to have. And I'm amazed at how poorly even some very large events do it. And that's because it's a boring topic, really, I suppose. But we've got risk of flooding the aquatic centre as an example. So when you create it with an impact and a likelihood. If you set it to 100%, it becomes an issue, otherwise it's a risk. So that sets that. That has some objectivity on risk and issue management. You've got other things around there that are important to it, which FA or FAs does it belong to, say with the project. And then you can build out these action steps. So who needs to do what, assign it to people, is it mitigation, is it a contingency step, when does it need to be done by? So these become like subtasks. I'm firing through quickly now because there's more interesting stuff that I can show you later. But reporting is probably where we start to really stand out. So we rebuilt this at the start of last year, I think, or the end of 2018. And we did that because there's a lot of information in here. We want to make a way that people could just extract as much as they want whenever they need it, but do it in a logical way. So these are the main components in the system. And what you can do is build out tables and charts and other interactive things and layer them all together. So I won't go through how you do this, but I've got a, I don't know what's in this one. Okay, so this report's got 4 different sections to it. It's got what are the gold milestones during the next 30 days. And it's also got what's the department summary. We've only got commercial and games ops in here. But then underneath that, we've got what are the functional area. And this is obviously very much geared up towards a major multi-sport event. It can, you know, reduce down and we can change the terms. So it doesn't need to be at that scale for it to make any sense. And then we've got upcoming items in the next 30 days. We can actually change all the stuff that's visible here and what order it's being displayed in. But once you've got that, you can save as a favorite, or you might say, you know what, this is really useful. Send it to me every week, starting from now until the end of the year. Send it on a Sunday night at 10 o'clock at night. So Monday morning, I've got it for my team meeting. So a client like the Cricket World Cup kept a very small PMO, but they had about 70 of these pre-made reports going out every Sunday night to the different venues, different cities, different functions. So that Monday morning was no longer what status is it? It was a report with the red stuff at the top and the green stuff at the bottom. And they'd start at the top and they'd go through all the urgent stuff until they ran out of time. So that's a very quick overview of the project side of it. You can download all of these as well, but let me download that for you. And again, this is, you know, my own real experience was London 2012, but I spent about 65% of my time creating reports. So the goal for me was, if I can stop doing that, then that's got to be helpful. So you can automate a lot of the reports and you get things sent, you know, in this sort of format. Okay, readiness I'm going to do really, really quickly. But the readiness is build out that entire, you know, program of what we've got. So simulations, build simulation was this is a walkthrough. So we can say, what are the readiness activities that we're going to be doing? What are we going to be testing at them? Within each of these, we can say, you know, who does it impact? What are the other variants and tags associated with it? And then you go through the exercise and say, look, this is passed, this has failed, this is pending actions, and then capture any lessons and the actions. So then those all feed back into, you know, your capabilities and the logs around that. And then again, automating reports. The clever bit for this, which is what's different to a normal system, is, if I go back actually, is when you do a readiness exercise, you might have the same capability with a different result at each of these activities. So in a normal project management system, you can't really have that because it has one status and then it has previous states. But this could be a walkthrough at one venue and this is a walkthrough at a different venue. So you actually have 2 different outcomes for the same capability. So I don't want to get bogged down in the technicalities of that, but showing you something a little bit easier. This is event control. So this would be a mock type system. In fact, let me show you one that's a little bit more interesting. So this is a fake stadium. So within this, again, we have all of our filters, and we can have radio channels, and we can, you know, customize it to fit the operations of that particular event. Users, and this is all built entirely mobile first. I'm just on a very wide screen, which is why there's a few gaps around it. But the very simple part is you create your structures and overlay. So we can add on different layers to this, or if you're in a temporary venue, then you can draw them on. You know, it doesn't really matter. And if you're doing this as a major multi-sport event, I think one of my developers was testing, which is why the whole of the east of England is one venue. But we can create and overlay, you know, all those different structures and venues, have zones and subzones, and then a user creates an incident, they give it a severity, and then they can pin it either to where they are or to a particular location, so it drops it into there. So we've got something, danger of slip in the kitchen. I've never looked at any of this, so there could be no data. Yeah, there's not much in here, but you can see who created it. You can add comments. You can be assigned to these sorts of things, assign it to a contractor or someone internally. We can build checklists. So if you have a policy for, say, missing child, you can say, right, add the missing child policy, and it will bring out the 12 steps that you need to do in order to resolve that. So it's just, you know, and it's not particularly complicated. It's much simpler than a whole program management system, because it's just recording exceptions to a plan, but trying to make it really easy to use. A normal training time for this platform is around 7 to 10 minutes. It's very, very simple. And then have the handover reports, the history of everything in there. You know, we've got log items as well. And this is the sort of area where we potentially can drop in other applications. So a few more integrations coming across this side of it. So run sheets, if I'm honest, we haven't entirely finished, because no one is delivering events at the moment. So no one is on site doing it. So we've slightly paused on that to focus on a couple of other things. But the concept is we have our run sheets. We've only got very small ones here, but you can have up to, you know, 1,000 items in a run sheet. And we say, you know, who's responsible for it, which zone or zones is it going to be applied to, and then we can either import from an Excel file, so you don't need to create everything manually in here, or we can duplicate old ones and say, what time is something happening, where does it need to happen, and who's responsible for it. Then you can also actually say, that's fine, either happens at this time, or it needs to happen 20 minutes after this item. So sports presentation and broadcast are really interested by it, because as soon as there's a delay, they'll get notified that something happens. So that is very simple. It's all designed to be viewed on your mobile. It will, if you want to export the classic Excels and PDF color-coded by function or by venue, then you can do that. And then what you can see is what's happening on a map. So these are not necessarily just for event days, of course. You could have your, you know, bump in schedule or whatever it is on the days leading up to it. So we can see what stuff is occurring as we go into venue ops mode around the events. Then what I like, and is probably the area that needs the most work, is because we've got this knowledge of those zones and structures and what's going on, and we can say where these items are going to be occurring, what we can use, in my mind, really useful for maybe volunteers or new workforce or something like that, is to be able to put it up on a map and say, press play. Okay, so this is happening at this time, then that's going to be happening over there, and we're going to add some activity charts across the bottom, so you can see peak times and low times and what's occurring. And it might just be an easier way to orientate a group of workforce or volunteers than just a great big static list, if you can't do a proper walkthrough beforehand. And then you can filter these by group, team, whatever you need to. So you can have your massive master sheet and then say that's fine, but your cleaning, catering and waste, you only need to see these 40 items.
So all this can be also watched on a mobile app, or there are only certain capabilities that you can use and see on the mobile?
The only thing you can't do on a mobile is a Gantt chart, because Gantt charts are useless on mobile, but everything else is mobile. Which is why we moved the whole system into this card format. So the problem with tables on mobiles is you have to keep dropping off columns. So we moved everything into this card format, and you can get a lot more information in that than you can on a table. So that's been part of the overhaul that we've done and continue to do to the system.
Right.
So yeah, that's it. We have some clients that have access to multiple sites and they can switch between them. We have some, or most that only have access to one. But there's help centers and there's lots and lots of stuff, of course, that we need to do to support something, because it can not get complicated, but if the client wants to put an entire operation through the platform at the different phases, then we need to make sure that we're around to support them. And interestingly, if I bring up so I'm just thinking if I've got any on this. So incidentally, in event control, all of our clients basically have this up on a big TV somewhere, and it will drop in pins as issues occur and then drop them back out once they're done. I was just seeing if we had any. Yeah, this one might work. So you can actually, in theory, depending if you had a new site, that you could actually put that there's a problem here, there's a serious fire outside the office, and whoever's created it can pin it to their location, so I can go in and see what that is. So, and then I can see there's another incident over there. It would need a little bit of work, but there's no reason in theory why we couldn't enhance all of this capability to try and help with some of that.
So this pinning, you do it when you run the readiness exercise, right?
So it can be used in various different places. So you can do it that way, or you can create them beforehand, or this is actually, I've got an issue here. So this is me creating an incident, going, look, I've got something catastrophic, and what's the location, pin it to my location, so it will drop it to where I am, and then it can be used for other people to know exactly where the issue is occurring. We don't ever put people in to run the program ourselves. It's something I know we've discussed a little bit, but our view is very much we go in, we talk to them, we can set things up. So we start with, say, customizing, configuring the language within the system. So what one person calls an employee, we're going to call a user. What one person calls a venue, we're going to call a cluster. So we go through and make sure all of that is correct. And that actually is a big part of making people adopt a new platform really quickly. They don't need to learn new terms or terms that they hadn't been using before. So then, yeah, we go in, we explain to them how they can use things, how they can set stuff up. We customize their milestones, all the different data and tags within the system. For some clients, they've got all of this ready, and we just take an import and then we just suck all the data in, and it can take a few days. For others, they use us much more to really try and shape how they're going to do it. And that's particularly true for new events or one-off major events. So something like Wimbledon, they've been running Wimbledon for I don't know how long, and even for that, they got us in to sit with some of their different departments who had all been working very much in isolation, to pull it all together, work through what they had in common, and then import all the data into the system. And then we do a series of training exercises, whether that's online, well, they're all online at the moment, but online or in person.
Right.
And then we have, I don't know, something like, I think 5,000 something users currently worldwide at any one time. And we get on average, I think, one support request or information request a day. So it's really, really low ticket volumes. And that is because we invest in the training and the setup to start with, rather than just download it, off you go, give us a shout if you have a problem. We do less now, and that is because the system's matured and there's less requirement to, quite often. So it was a decision in the early days. What often happens with systems is, if they're very small companies and they get a big client and they're asked to modify something, they will modify it. But then as they grow, that becomes unsustainable. You have different databases and different branches of your code. So it took much longer in the early days to be able to configure everything. So we can configure rather than customize. But we are absolutely, and because we're entirely focused in events, it's not like we're also trying to do construction and also help lawyers do their projects. It means that if we do get a request, it's very rarely in direct contrast to what we wanted to do anyway. So we do custom work, but it all has to sit within our roadmap of what we're doing. It's a big area for us at the moment, and we've been rebuilding a lot of the platform to make that much easier in future. So currently we do things like integrate with Active Directory. So for companies that have their Active Directory, they don't need to log in with separate passwords. They can just use their company profile. We also have integrations with Slack and things like What 3 Words, which I think I mentioned earlier, is a 3-word location for anywhere on Earth. It's a 3x3 meter grid. So that was our most recent that we did last week or the week before. What we're going to be doing now is a few more of the deeper integrations. So probably Microsoft Teams would be a big one that we start doing it with, although we've got the Slack integration, but I think Teams is overtaking them very quickly. And then we are going to start working a lot more with the event-specific providers. So the Wiz team, who I know you know well. In fact, he sent me an email today. Tim sent me an email today about potential integration for FIVB. So we've both been looking for clients where we both work with them and have the potential to use that as a test case, rather than it becomes very expensive and very difficult to predict if two suppliers just get together and go, let's build all the integrations, because we don't know how it might actually be used. So it's much better to have a real life example to work towards. But very simply, we can have things like, if I have my incident dashboard, this could be on-site event control. I might be pulling through a feed from Wiz or whatever that platform is on. You've got 40% of your volunteers have actually arrived as a metric, and you've had these accreditation breaches, whatever it is. We can pull through a system feed into here, click onto that system, it will open up in a new tab and already authenticate back into that system, so they wouldn't need to log into it. So that's a very simple way of being able to combine the views within one platform without having to try and build deep integrations. So yeah, there's lots coming, absolutely.